There we go. Okay. Well, Sean, thank you so much for being available to talk to me today. For our IOTA community, we're very, very happy that you were selected as one of the Silverman Award winners on healing and conflict resolution. And it was through Judy Neal that we learned about the work you're doing. And it's fascinating, even when you don't know a whole lot about it. So today we'd like you to share a bit of your trajectory in life,
Yeah.
some of the paths you've had, and maybe the weaving in of some organization development as we go. But I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you is, how did you start? You started with OD. How did that happen, and where did that lead you?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for inviting me, and it's an honor to receive the award. Wow. I love that question because it takes me back. Um, I was an undergrad at DePaul University,
Mhm.
and I think I had 6 different majors before I selected on industrial and organizational psychology
There you
for
go.
my undergrad.
Right.
I took an org behavior class, and I'm like, oh, this is it. It kind of combined everything I was looking for.
Sure.
You know, I started out in corporate finance, and calculus killed me. And so I pretty much was like, this is not for me. I ended up in IO Psych. And, I started a gay and lesbian youth group for the city of Dayton, Ohio when I was 16.
Uh-huh.
And so it was, which still exists today, but it was something that whenever I made life decisions, I always thought back to what was it about creating that community. And it was really my sense of service
Okay.
and wanting to create change in the world. And so I actually started in a master's in public service administration program. And I couldn't figure out which cause spoke to me. And I couldn't see myself as an executive director of any type of organization.
Sure.
And so again, there was like a graduate level org behavior class in my third class in the program. And I was like, oh, wait, this is what I want to do. And if I want to create change in organizations, what if I learn the tools of change and transformation and be a consultant to nonprofits as opposed to being executive director?
Right.
And so I transferred from DePaul's master's program to Loyola of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually was not eligible to enroll. I didn't have enough experience. And I didn't have the 5 years. And so I said, well, hypothetically, if you were to accept me, what would I have to do?
Right.
So they said, well, you'd have to give us additional writing samples, interview with every faculty, and do another type of project. So I'm like, all right. So I did that. And by the last interview, they're like, you know what? You're not going anywhere. We're just going to let you in because you're going to wear us down. So I got into the master's in OD, graduated at 27.
Nice.
And then I became an organization development professor at Baruch, Cornell, and NYU over that time, 2 years later at 29.
That's marvelous.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure since we share the Cornell connection, I'm sure that the students at the Industrial Labor Relations School really benefited from your presence and the work you were doing. That's super. That's wonderful. And tell us a little bit about Eileen Fisher. I know you work there, and so it's kind of like, well, you said you didn't want to be anybody's boss, but you're in a corporation.
Right.
How did that happen?
I was a consultant. Prior to Eileen Fisher, I was a consultant working with mostly Wall Street and big media companies in New York. And I was also, like I said, a college professor.
Right.
And on my 40th birthday, I had just had enough. I had had enough of hypermasculine work cultures. And I had had enough of trying to create miracles in 2-hour segments and trying to change organizations in what felt like superficial interventions.
Sure.
Right. And so I resigned on my 40th birthday as my birthday present to me.
Good.
And
what
a present. And within 2 weeks, a friend of mine who had worked at Eileen Fisher was working at Eileen Fisher said, hey, we're hiring for an organization development partner. Do you know anyone that might be interested? And as I thought about it, I said, if there was one company that I could probably be in-house, it's this organization.
Okay.
Because it just sounded so different from anything I'd ever heard of. And so I applied. I went on an 8-month interview process.
Okay. Wow.
So it was, I met with about 27 people. I had to do a case study and 3 consulting projects, and then I got an offer.
Wow.
And on the first day, this was the pivotal moment that changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
On the first day, my 2 bosses sat me down and they said, Sean, we just want to let you know, you have proven yourself in the interview process. We now want you to stop proving yourself and learn how to be who you actually are.
Whoa.
When you interviewed with us, you showed us your heart and you showed us your polish. We hired you for your heart and we want to see less of your polish.
Okay.
We want to see you unfiltered and we're going to support you in that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Eileen's living room in her house, close to our Irvington office, with my team and our chief culture officer. And we were doing this arts-based experience. Within 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I was doing interpretive dance to a poem about a bumblebee finding her nectar while drums were beating in the background and I was wearing a blue silk headscarf.
Wow.
My boss comes up to me laughing and says, you know you're in a different world now, right? I said, yeah, I'm starting to get that. And so with that, I was on my journey. And I think what makes Eileen Fisher, I mean, there's so many ways that Eileen Fisher was a different type of company.
Right.
But I think first and foremost was that it was built on feminine leadership and the business model was based on feminine energy.
Got it.
And so it wasn't women leading the organization built on a masculine model.
Sure.
It was truly allowing women to not have to act like men to succeed in business.
Certainly. Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed then is because women were able to be in their feminine and operate authentically, it gave men permission to be authentic and explore themselves. And I started to know notice how men in the company were healing and transforming just by being in the environment.
Wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you start the day meditating and other.
Oh, no, actually, we started every meeting meditating.
Every meeting. Uh-huh.
So there were Tibetan singing bowls in every conference room.
Okay.
And every meeting started with silence and meditation. And then you would go into a personal check-in and then a professional check-in, and then you would start the work.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That is something wonderful. Wow. And then you kept evolving into expanding your interests while you were at Eileen Fisher, and then maybe decided to do your Institute Symphonia, or how did we get
how did we get here?
there? Yeah. Part of the journey, not yet finished, but you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think first, I was able to do an NTL lab, an HI lab. That was one of the requirements for all OD practitioners at Eileen Fisher.
I see.
And so it was some really powerful work around limiting beliefs.
Uh-huh.
And then I was sent to an artist commune in Canada for 5 months. So 5 weekends over 5 months, I was learning how to incorporate the arts into creative facilitation.
Wonderful.
Now, when I worked on Wall Street, I had this vision for a retreat center. So I've just been holding this idea that, this would be a place, and I think looking back, to really develop change agents in a more conscious way.
Right.
And to really, in particular, work with men.
Got it.
And so being at the artist commune, my first weekend after doing a number of different arts experiences, I had this one visualization on Sunday morning, and I just saw my entire life pass before my eyes. And I started to notice, oh, I've been designed to do men's work from having grown up as more androgynous to really look at masculine, feminine energy early on.
Got it.
The experiences in OB systems and seeing that this is a much bigger conversation and really what's the work we can start to do with leaders.
Right.
when they come into their integrated, more conscious selves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I
Well,
knew I
let
was,
me just ask you a second.
yeah,
Would you speculate or believe that the environment, Eileen Fisher, and some of the things that you were doing there as part of just their culture,
mhm,
you know, the work that you did with signs and
right.
the
Uh,
astrological signs and things like that, did that kind of give you the sense that, gee whiz, I can have all this creative thinking
right.
in myself for my
Right.
work?
Well, when I would, so a couple of things. I mean, I think, yeah, in terms of the culture, besides the meditation, we had access to spiritual guides and teachers within the environment. So
Hmm.
Akashic readers, medical intuitives, astrologers. Um, we moved from traditional structure to flat organization to holacracy.
Hmm.
We started to explore in that space. And I became the head of personal transformation and well-being,
Okay.
where we were taking employees through limiting beliefs work, embodiment work, shadow work, spirit and mindfulness, ego relaxation work, Enneagram work.
Right.
And so I was coming into my own. I
Hmm.
think part of it, what I experienced personally, was becoming more comfortable in my own skin
Sure.
and having the latitude to play with things that aren't necessarily socially acceptable.
There. Uh-huh.
Other men were also able to do this.
Hmm.
And so I would go to men in the company, and we were about 17% of the company.
Uh-huh.
And I would say, hey, I feel like I'm changing. Are you noticing you're changing? And
Yeah.
guys would say, well, my wife said that I listen differently.
Uh-huh.
I'm more patient. My favorite, I stopped needing to be right all the time, and I started to be more curious.
Good. Yeah.
I started to have more access to my emotional expression,
Uh-huh.
and I was starting to become more creative. I was solving problems differently.
Great.
I think one of the things that I noticed was the ways we engaged in meetings. There was more, men became more comfortable with the gray
Hmm.
and nuance, getting out of the polarities of black and white thinking,
Right.
and having more patience with the conversations to actually stay in the gray without a need to go to the outcome.
Got it.
Right. And so I think that was giving a lot of permission.
Sure.
And, so I just started saying, of all the ways we can really help men heal, there's something here that I think we need to share with more men.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to get you off of
No,
you
no,
were
no.
talking about your retreat in
Yeah.
Canada. I just thought that maybe that would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
part of that retreat and then whatever happened after the retreat.
Yeah. No, it's great. No, it's great. And, you know, and so all of this work, and I think the spiritual connections in the organization, that we actually talked about spirituality and the organization of deeper consciousness. It led me to seminary,
Hmm. There you go.
and I became an interfaith minister. When I realized I was meant to do men's work and I had gone to Eileen Fisher to not have to work with men again, I knew this was like this was beyond my pay grade.
Yeah.
And I actually went to seminary for one reason, which was I knew if we wanted to create organizational change and societal systems change,
uh,
men's healing had to be at the soul level. We had to start doing the soul transformation work with men.
yes.
And I knew that if I was going to hold that, I had to do my own grounding. So
Sure.
that's what led me to seminary.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Which then led you into yet new activities, right?
Yeah. So, you know, I ended up moving to Asheville, North Carolina, to create to what I thought I would be creating a retreat center
Hmm.
for men for compassionate healing, and that's really where the idea of Symphonia Institute came along.
Got it.
One thing I created along the way was developing facilitators at the beginning of the pandemic to be able to hold deep space
Hmm.
in the virtual realm.
Got it.
And that led to, as I graduated seminary, something I created called Soulful Facilitator Intensive. How
Uh-huh.
do we bring head, heart, body, and spirit into the spaces we facilitate?
Sure.
All the while, then, living in Asheville. And then one thing happened along the way, though, 2 days before I graduated seminary, I received a video from a friend, and it was a video from the chief of police in Asheville,
Mhm.
saying that they really had some issues with the Black Lives Matter protest.
Uh-huh.
They came in militarized, they made mistakes, they were reforming the police department. And if anyone in the community wanted to be part of police reform efforts, to email them directly. So the next morning, I emailed him directly, and that led to a one-on-one conversation between me and the chief of police.
Mhm.
And he put forward the ask. He's like, can you help me deepen the level of compassion among my officers?
Wow.
And can you hold space for community members and officers to humanize each other so they can create a different type of relationship going forward?
Beautiful. Wow.
So we never really had a chance to do that work because they lost 80 officers through his retirements and resignations in about 6 months.
Ooh.
But there were a group of us that kind of found each other, and we actually started a national coalition called Project Compassion, to bring compassion into policing. And now we're bringing this work of compassionate masculinity, and really personal transformation work for officers into police departments.
Well, beautiful. Was that the nucleus for your book on warrior compassion, or is that something not related?
You know, when I lead a group of about anything, I typically find that it's about 85% women that show up.
Uh-huh.
And I started to ask myself, okay, but men need this.
Sure.
Men need what we're talking about. Men need personal transformation. They need the consciousness, the compassion work. So I said, what will reach more men? And some of it's language, some of it's energy, some of it's the way we position it. But combined with working with police and the connection to military and intelligence communities, along with what will stick for business leaders, so they will want to come into something and really start to explore themselves. That's where warrior compassion came in.
Got it.
And I think, at first, when I did my TEDx, it was called Compassion Makes the Warrior.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, okay, Compassion Makes the Warrior, that's going to be a great book. But the folks were at Georgetown, where I'm writing my book, they're like, no, we don't like that. That's too many words. I'm like, okay,
Oh my God.
4 words.
Okay.
So I said, well, we could call it Compassionate Warrior. And they're like, and then we said, or we could call it Warrior Compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a distinction. Compassionate Warrior leads with the feminine, and it also asks men to embody an identity,
Sure.
claim an identity as the warrior.
Mm-hmm.
What we're really talking about is having the warrior energy activate compassion, leading with the masculine.
Sure.
And so it really has become this energy within men that if they're courageous enough to look within themselves, that compassion is required for the healing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can do that fierce level of examination with rigorous honesty,
sure,
that's where real healing is gonna stem from.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow. We were so lucky here in the DC area that you decided to move. Want to share that a little bit with the IOTA community on how you got to Washington, DC?
Yeah.
Or in the larger metropolitan area?
Well, I think it's, as I mentioned, the Akashic reader that I had. Right. One of the things when I moved to Asheville, she had commented at the very end, it was sort of this blip, and she said, you have one more relocation left. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I can't. I'm like, I just moved here. She's like, no, just one more relocation. It's a bigger city, not like New York, and you'll be drawn in by the work. Sure. And so I did a mental calculation, and then I just got this intuitive hit, and I was like, oh, it's going to be DC. And just felt like if there was a place to create a global movement for compassionate healing, basing it in DC made the most sense. Okay. And then I was in Asheville probably for about 9 months. And it was actually January 6th. That's when I really kind of heard the call to move to DC. And I made my declaration that evening after actually having a conversation with a mystic and in our conversation. And then 3 months later, I was living here. I was living in this area. And yes, is this an area to build a move, to invite a movement? But I think it's also, if there was a place to really bring in this idea of compassionate masculinity, the warrior compassion, it's in the DC area. I think, my sense is this is a very intellectual city. This is a very masculine city. I think there's a lot of actually hyper-masculine culture here that bringing the light of compassion into these spaces is a real opportunity. And so I think I'm still unraveling why I'm here, but I know deep down that this is where I'm supposed to be, and this is the place to base the work.
Sure. Oh, that's really wonderful. Thank you so much. And kind of, I'm not concluding, but can you share with us how you had mentioned about how you're kind of going back to your OD roots, or you're using some of your OD approaches more here than you had in other places? Share that with us.
I think it's really easier to lose touch of our OD roots when we go into organizations. Trying to sell the true, pure OD work can be challenging. And I remember when I was in consulting before I went to Eileen Fisher, that I was really doing a lot more change management than I was doing OD. I was getting paid for change management. And so I think that was a place where I lost touch with really my OD roots in New York.
Okay.
Now at Eileen Fisher, they actually really tapped into the OD work. And I spent a lot of time developing retreats and offsites, incorporating more practices, and I think in my second year, I designed and facilitated about 56 days of retreats.
Wow.
And so we were able to really create I did a lot of team building, did a lot of team cohesion work, bringing in the creativity, bringing in the embodiment work and somatic work. But I think at the root, I think some of the OD values, I was really seeing them hold true.
That's marvelous. Yeah.
And they were embracing the purity of the craft. And so I think that reignited me. And now coming to DC, so many people in the OD community, I'm finding that, I'm coming back to this idea that the link between personal transformation work, coming up with new models of leadership they're moving from fear-based control to compassion or love-based liberation, looking at power dynamics differently, and then moving into how do we really think differently about systems change, so we can really create something that's scalable, impactful. I think the only ways we're going to be able to do that is by tapping into a deeper sense of the work, holding on to the pure ideals of the work, as opposed to losing sight of them. And I think the economics can be often the motivator.
Sure. Yes.
And flip side of it is the ways that we can still hold on to the core essence of the work. I find that I'm coming back into the fold in ways I hadn't expected, and yet I know it's so critical in order to really create that type of impact.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you. So as concluding, because I know we want to, we don't want to hold you all day. It's fascinating to listen to you and hear about you and what you're doing. But is there something else you'd like the community? We do hope to see you at one of our conferences in the future, of course, so that you'll get an international touch of OD people, because IOTA is spread around the world. But is there something more you'd like to share with us about what you're doing um, and how you feel about it.
Yeah. You know, I think right now I'm in the inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm in the inquiry of this work of helping, and the way I kind of look at it, working with men at the root of the power centers
Mm-hmm.
who have the ability to affect change in organizational systems.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things will transform when they engage in their own transformation work.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can start to come together. I think I'm in the inquiry of the link between men's healing and ultimately seeing it lead to the ways we create, um, we reimagine systems,
That's great.
you know, and how to start inviting that into more organizations, especially these hypermasculine cultures. So I think that right now I have probably more questions than answers. I have more of a vision, and I'm trying to hold on to the integrity in the ways to bring this into organizations without losing the teeth or the essence of it
Mm-hmm.
in the commercialization of the work.
Marvelous.
And so I think that's what I want to put out there is, you know, no matter what, I mean, I see this as a global conversation, not a US based conversation. I don't believe this is the definition of the masculine and this is the feminine. I think it's very unique and individual to each individual. And I think this is, you know, the social justice approach that we often take in this work to right the injustice. That's one approach.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure it's actually the one that's going to reach the audiences that we need to reach the most.
Got it.
And I think the opportunity is to really come in from a place of love, compassion, and inquiry
Mm-hmm.
to talk about the silent suffering that these leaders are experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
the loneliness, the isolation,
Exactly.
and where they're shouldering the weight and the burden of the work and feeling like they have to do it alone. And what I'm finding is this work is really at the essence coming down to relationship.
Right.
And one of the challenges I find, even among change agents, as much as we espouse the ideals of collaboration, most of us as men struggle with collaboration because I think our conditioning really still creates the roadblocks for us to truly trust, to truly surrender, and truly come into relationship in the way that's going to really help us create the impact that we want to create and have the lives that we want to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaningful lives. Yes.
Meaningful lives, fulfilling lives.
Exactly.
And and I think the movement, I think so many of our practices are moving us to this place of collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think we have a lot of internal roadblocks that actually prevent us from doing it in authentic ways versus giving it lip service.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's the good challenge for us, right?
Yeah.
That is so good. Sean, I want to thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us. I am going to stop recording now. That's just a second.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it very much. And